Welcome, 7 o'clock, so we'll get started. Thank you all for coming out tonight. So we're here for a public information session on the new police station proposed on Booton Street. City Council approved in 2024 the acquisition of the 4 Booton Street, the former Concord Group Insurance building, for the purposes of a new police station. So since that time, we've been working on design, site analysis, all the fun stuff that our consultants will talk with you about tonight. The goal for tonight is we will be going to City Council Monday night for a presentation and then hopefully in November for a public hearing. But we wanted this sort of forum and an opportunity for you to see the process we've gone through, the needs of the police station, and to ask more questions about the design that you may not necessarily have the opportunity to do during one of the council meetings. So that's the goal for tonight, and the focus is to talk about the building and the proposed improvements on the site. As we go through, we're hoping to talk around 30, 40 minutes. We'd like to hold questions till the end, and we'll have a whole time for discussion. If you're afraid you're going to forget your question, we have some pens and scrap paper in the back if you want to write yourself a note, just so you remember to ask it towards the end. Oh, you're on the next slide. So, introducing myself, I'm Beth Fenstermacher, Director of Special Projects with Community Development for the City of Concord. I'm the PM working on this for the police department. Jay Burgess, the public property superintendent, and I are working very closely together with Chief Osgood, and then our deputy chiefs, Bolton, Smagula, and Casey, who are up here up front. So they'll be here to answer any questions you have specific for the police department. Milestone Construction is the construction management team. They're local firm here in Concord. They've done a lot of work for the city, and we're happy to be working with them as well. And then tonight we have our design team. We have from Harriman. I'll let them introduce themselves, and MW Studios, and I'll pass it off to them. They'll talk for a while. I'll come back, and we'll open it for Q&A.
Thank you, Beth, very much. And thank you for all of you coming out tonight. Really important part of the process of this project is ensuring that the community is really part of the conversation about what this facility is. And so we're here to present the information in terms of its progress so far. So my name is Mark Lee, and I'm an architect and principal with Harriman. We're an architecture and engineering firm with offices in New Hampshire and Maine and Massachusetts. And so our history goes all the way back to the point where we were involved in the original construction of the insurance building, and so back in the 1950s and 60s. And so that shows you our longevity, but I haven't been around that long, so I'm not bad, right? So 155 years. But and we've been delighted to be partners in this project. The design team is also headed with Kelly Stanford, who is an architect in Harriman's firm as well. And for this project, we brought in expertise on a national level of a firm that does public safety facilities across the country. And so Rob Manns is the representative from MW Studios, and Rob has 25 years experience in designing public safety facilities. And so that knowledge that he brings to the table, translating the needs of public safety facilities, their operations into actually how does that translate into the needs of a building. So that's sort of this leg of the design team. But we work collaboratively with the contractor, with PD, and with the city in order to make this a success. As Beth mentioned, our agenda tonight really is to kind of give you an overview of the project itself. And so we'll talk about what are the existing conditions? Why is there a need for a new facility? And so that'll be the first thing we go over, and we'll share some examples of the conditions that they're working in right now. We'll talk a little bit about the new site location for the facility and why that was chosen. We'll talk about the new facility itself and how does it roughly lay out, and how does that manifest itself in preserving a building that still has value in the old office building, but then how do you build a new police station next to it in a way that respects it and takes advantage of the site and all the efficiencies of an addition as opposed to a brand new building. So we'll talk a lot about that as well. And I'm sure cost is sometimes a consideration in these things, and so we'll give you an update on where we think that the relative cost of this project is. And then, importantly, where can you continue to stay informed about the project? And so where do you find that information? Where can you continue to ask questions? And so as this project moves forward, you'll have an opportunity to stay informed through all of that. And so with that, I'm going to pass it, real quickly before I pass it over to Kelly, just in terms of where we are in this process of starting the project to when a new project actually, when the facility is constructed and completed and they move in. So it started back in May of 2024 with the purchase of the building itself. And so that is then the next step was about almost a year ago. There was a project kickoff. They hired the architectural team. We started collaborating and working with the police department, understanding their needs. We started collecting a lot of information about what those needs are and began the design process in earnest. We're right now probably about 60% of the way through that entire design process. And so we're working through the details, and we get those details vetted through feedback from the PD and the city, and then we share that with the contractor. That's all part of that as well. So that process is continuing. It's iterative, and it's almost at the conclusion of that. Where we're going with this is we complete that design in the fall here. We're looking at sort of the beginning of the new year to complete everything, bidding and permitting that, and in the early part of 2026, and then construction will start early next year if everything goes as it's planned right now. And it takes a little while for a facility of this size to get constructed. And so right now we're looking at a construction schedule that will take us through to a move-in in the fall of 2027. So that's kind of gives you a little bit of a very broad overview of the process and where we are in all of that right now. So with that, then I'll turn it over to Kelly, who will share a little bit more about, as we talked about, the existing conditions of the facility itself. Kelly?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So current police station was built in 1975. We're going on 50 years of life cycle. So that was the benchmark for us. We need to create another building that'll last another 50 years. The existing square footage is only about 20,000 square feet, spread over 4 stories. And we'll get into a little bit of that later and how the verticality of the building presents a lot of challenges in and of itself. The city currently, the population is at 45,000 residents, which balloons during the day, doubles that. And the call count is around 50,000 calls a year. And we'll let the chiefs maybe speak to that a little bit later and how the police department responds to all of that. So but what they come back to is their headquarters. How do we best support the officers that then are able to go out and best serve their community? There's currently 90 sworn officers and about 26 full and part-time staff that support them. And everything's projected to increase. So you can see projections here down for 2044 is what the city is tracking and mandated that we are able to continue with this building to support the PD in their growth and ability to serve the community. So some of the challenges, and Rob, you can also jump in and assist me here. You know, we toured the building. We worked very, very closely with the PD, and they have done marvelous things with what they have. But what we were starting to see too is, you know, a lot of the spaces were doing double and triple duty. They have outgrown it considerably, which results in slower emergency response times, security vulnerabilities, multiple staffing challenges. If they're waiting for a space to free up, it prohibits them from, you know, being boots on the ground back out on the streets sooner. Everybody is, well, maybe not everybody, but people are familiar with the public lobby, the public perception of the existing building, and also the spaces, infrastructure are functionally dated. Some are unable to support accreditation at the current national level and are, as I mentioned, overburdened in many, many ways, and Rob can speak.
So I'll try to cover some of this. I mean, the landscape of public safety, not just law enforcement in specific, but public safety as large, has transformed dramatically within the past 5-10 years, let alone the past 50. And as a measure of that, and I'll look towards the chiefs up here to kind of nod or hopefully agree with me. 15 years ago, were you guys doing active shooter training? 10 years ago, were you doing fentanyl exposure training? So the reality is those are just a few of the challenges that police officers and the civilian staff that supports them faces every single day. And as we tour the building and look at the facilities that they have, it's very clear that they have done the absolute best, and as Kelly pointed out, a marvelous job in working within the conditions that they have. But the operational protocols of a modern law enforcement agency, that is striving to meet the gold standard, and the gold standard is CALIA certification. That's a national agency that credits law enforcement and basically says, hey, everything is truly on the up and up. That's what every city really should be striving for, at least whether they achieve that accreditation or aim to achieve that accreditation or not. That system of measurement becomes kind of the gold standard. And that's based on a national platform of experts that look at that. When we tour the facility and we look at some of the challenges that they face, some of which we'll talk about today, others, for the safety of the officers, we will withhold that information, but know that there are very evident security vulnerabilities that place not just the police officers themselves, but some of the civilian staff that are tasked with, staffing the front desk or call dispatchers and whatnot are faced with some specific challenges. And my very first experience in January, I showed up to the lobby in the front door and was immediately met by an individual who came to the police department for some information and was arrested in a 6 foot by 6 foot, what felt like a 6 foot by 6 foot, very small lobby because this individual had an outstanding warrant. So I, as a member of the public, am in a very confined space. Fortunately, it was someone that was not violent, not wishing to do harm to anyone, and was somewhat surprised that they were being taken into custody. But nonetheless, those are the types of situations that we observe. Lack of ballistic glazing. And we can look across the country at events that have occurred, and no place is immune. I come from Baltimore, north of Baltimore, and I live near a small town called Havre de Grace, Maryland, which is at the head of the Chesapeake. And it's kind of like Pleasantville, USA, right? That kind of stuff doesn't happen here. And they have 5 sworn officers. I think they're up to 10 now. And an individual called 911 one evening and said, hey, I'm going to kill a police officer tonight. We fortunately did not design this police station. However, they proceeded to take the police department on a high-speed chase through town and then drove the car right through the front door of the police station. Fortunately, no one was there and no one was killed, but it kind of proves the point that nowhere in the United States is immune to a person wishing and willing to do harm. And when we look at through the lens of public perception of law enforcement and the challenges that law enforcement agencies face in public perception, one of the key things that we look for as a design team that focuses on public safety is what's called a transparent fortress. And the objectives that you'll see as we kind of go through design, and Kelly will talk about them momentarily, are to make sure that the men and women that serve their community are afforded the absolute greatest opportunity to return home safely to their families every single night. And there are measures that are included in the new design to give them that best shot at life. At the same time, the transparency is absolutely essential. We recognize that from a national perspective, when we've had the opportunity to do work as far northeast as Caribou, Maine, as far south as Charleston, Carolina, and as far west as LA and the state of Washington, and listen, I come from Baltimore, so I can say this with some humor. There is a lack of trust in some law enforcement agencies. And the ability, I'm not suggesting that is conquered proper, but the ability to present the building in a way that tells the community, hey, we're here, the light's on, we intend to serve, we are available, we are a beacon of hope, and we are a beacon of trust, becomes part of that exercise. And so some of the existing conditions that we see here that are highlighted, the slower emergency response, security vulnerabilities, the accreditation challenges, I mean, we can see just in that one space, I believe that was the transport van or the crime scene van, crammed in there next to all of the maintenance facility, the fleet manager, the fleet maintenance guy stuff, If you walk in that room, you can smell the hydraulic fluid, you can smell the oil. The image to the left is where all of the officers come, which is at the back of that building to fulfill their daily go bags, which that was actually a decent day, but 8 inches of snow, all that muck kind of just works its way in. And if we kind of go to the next slide, we'll see some other examples of, that was a storage room that was turned into the evidence area. Well, actually, it was in the mezzanine that was built out of wood, and they just keep loading it with evidence and files and evidence. And a national standard is that any heinous crime, whether it be murder or rape or something, or sexual assault, that evidence is typically retained for a very long period of time, sometimes forever. And so those things get retained. And it was interesting from an architect's perspective. I kind of felt like, okay, is this floor gonna give? Because it certainly feels like a trampoline as we walk across it. And it's some security challenges associated with the things that are there. Offices turned into conference rooms, that space, and we'll speak to the image on the right, that space is the main conference room. One of the challenges that law enforcement agencies nationwide face is the ability to recruit and retain. It's a very challenging profession. And as we look at that, the lack of space, let alone the lack of professional space that it can attract the best, the brightest, the most qualified personnel is kind of lacking. And that just happens to be as a result of being out of space and having to cannibalize the leftover areas, the storage rooms, the closets. Hey, we got this high volume, we'll throw a mezzanine up in there where our evidence room will now become the storage room, and the storage room will now become the office. So after 50 years, if anybody's familiar with the computer term, defragging the hard drive, that building has become extremely fragmented and extremely inefficient. If we go through some of the other slides, I think you'll see the image on the right is a storage room of the ladies' locker room. Just look at the amount of gear that is on top of that space. There's not even enough room for their ballistic vests. If what is not captured in image is the musty smell for the lack of ventilation. And coming in on a snowy day when you're sweating and all that gear ends up coming off of you. I mean, those are some specific challenges, and that gear is not expensive, or that gear is expensive, rather. Misspoke. That gear is expensive, and when it's not properly stored and ventilated, those are operational challenges and expenses that need to be replaced more frequently than not. The left is the police officer's report writing area. It's up on the second floor, not anywhere close to patrol. So if I bring somebody in as a police officer that I've detained and I need to monitor them, that requires a second officer to supervise them while I go and write that report. In addition, at times they're processing evidence there. They're eating their lunch there. So, processing evidence that may have had fentanyl in it and then subsequently eating my Panera Bread sandwich next to that puts my health and life at risk. So just being cognizant of how those things have happened. And so the fragmentation, the lack of space, and we can go through some of the other images, I think, as we look towards the future, things like real-time crime center capability, the 911 communications center, being able to tie in better information, to relay that information to the officers on the street in a more timely manner to expedite the calls for service. So this is an example of a 911 communication center that we had completed, and generally they're low light areas. We promise it can come on and be brighter, but when they're staring at a computer screen for 20 hours, they tend to get fatigued. So that's a dark image on purpose. But as we go through some other examples that I spoke to, and their projections, actually go back if you don't mind too, the projections. Yeah, go back one right there. No, go to the same slide that we had. The projections, I think just some commentary on a national perspective, and Chief, please feel free to steal the mic and tell me I'm right or wrong on this, but the calls for service are continuing to go up. What those statistics often fail to really communicate is that the calls for service not only are going up, but are becoming even more and more challenging, the types of calls that are being demanded. So 15 years ago, and this is a national issue, right? 15 years ago, law enforcement agencies were being called for somebody smoking marijuana in front of the 7-Eleven, and that was a call for service. And they would send out a police officer to do that. Nationally, that is not so much the trend anymore, right? That's hey, we're not even going to deal with that. That's a misdemeanor or whatever. We've got bigger fish to fry. And the calls for service are generally much more challenging than those simple misdemeanor calls that used to one time be criminal charges. So while we're seeing the calls increase, recognize that is not just increasing in volume, but also increasing in complexity. So therefore, the necessity for additional officers in order to handle those calls, because inevitably what ends up happening because those law enforcement officers end up spending more time on scene, more time processing the paperwork, more time writing the reports, and more time dealing with the individuals, taking reports and taking testimony for the things that have happened. So some of the features that we look to kind of replicate, if we go to the next slide, or as examples, improving the health, safety, and wellness of the first responders that are assigned to this building and the support staff that's there. So, this is an example of a law enforcement facility that we've been privileged to work on. It actually was just dedicated last Saturday. So you can see the front of the building, while it might look appropriately landscaped and kind of inviting, those are crash-rated bollards and crash-rated stormwater management facilities. You could try, please don't, but you could try to drive a dump truck to that building and you would probably be unsuccessful in reaching the perimeter of the facility. The glazing is level 5 ballistically rated glass, which is capable of withstanding rifle fire in 3-inch groupings, this particular facility. And so what we're doing is we're looking at ways of engaging the community in a positive way. You can see the amount of natural light that is spilling into the space. One of the things that is often not reported is police officers and firefighters suffer from a higher rate of post-traumatic stress disorder than combat veterans at significant margins. They are often tasked with seeing maybe not as horrific of events as one might see in combat, but they see it for a prolonged period of time, an entire career. There were studies that came out of Baltimore City that officers with 5 years of experience in Baltimore City have the same amount of lifetime stress-induced factors that a police officer assigned to a small town in the middle of nowhere, Maryland, would have faced in a 35-year career. So inevitably what ends up happening is these stress factors come in, and we know that things like good indoor air quality, which the current facility lacks, good access to natural light, play a large role in combating depression and balancing circadian rhythm. And all of that stuff is proven through our allied design professionals that work in healthcare, right? Who wants to go into a hospital room with no natural light? Or if anybody's been on a cruise ship and has an interior room, it's not exactly the most inviting time for a full week. So these are the types of things that we think about. We've also, it's listed as gender inclusive, but the idea is that we are providing space for all types of officers and have to recognize that the demographics of a law enforcement agency changes over time and it ebbs and flows. So making sure that we don't have male locker rooms that don't have enough lockers and female locker rooms that have a surplus that can't be used, right? Meaning that today I've got, if Chief came to me today and said, hey, design 60 male locker rooms and 40 for female, well, if we have 70 and 30, that means that I have 10 on one side that can't be used and I have 10 officers that are male sitting out in the corridor. So we've developed solutions as part of the design to mitigate square footage increase and to allow flexibility to ensure that every officer, regardless of their gender, has space necessary assigned to them to fulfill their duty for the foreseeable future. So those are just a couple of the features, and one of the things that Kelly, I'm sure, will talk about when we get to the existing building relative to the addition is the importance of essential facilities. And so the building code establishes that a law enforcement facility, much like a fire station, must be designed to be a last building standing. And we have essential operations facilities and we have non-essential operations facilities, right? So one might say, and Kelly will get into this momentarily, that the fitness center is not essential to withstand a natural disaster, but the patrol officers and the 911 communication center better be functional at all times. And the building code describes that and lays that out for us. So the design takes advantage of the existing building, which Kelly will talk about in greater detail, and leverages the addition to support the essential resiliency of the facility to make sure that your police department is capable of serving in all types of events, natural and man-made. We can go to the next slide and kind of move through. So Kelly, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the site approach, and you can kind of take it from there.
Thank you, Rob. So the new site is at 4 Boonton. We have a lot of really great existing infrastructure. I mean, the building itself is a mid-century modern gem. So it was a pleasure to work with that building. And to Rob's point, this illustrates it pretty well. You've got the light beige existing building. And then the critical facility, category 4, is the addition. And we were able to find a gentle connection point that made sense, so that the flow between the building is harmonious, both architecturally and from a workflow standpoint. And the existing building can support a lot of the non-critical administrative office, training rooms, multi-purpose room, etc. The site itself is in an excellent location. It's almost geographically fairly centered within the city. It sits at the intersection of North State and Boonton, just off of the highway. And there's also a lot of other great things happening. There's an existing bus stop, which we're maintaining. A lot of the utility infrastructure coming into the site has already been, sized to an appropriate scale, so we're able to utilize that without too much disruption. And it's in a great prominent visibility location within the city. To Rob's point, they're there to serve. They're there to be a part of the community and visible and responsible and respectful of their environment. Being mindful of the neighbors, it is a tight site. We are reestablishing a perimeter fence, both for security purposes, and it will be a solid fence to buffer out any sight and sound that may impact the neighbors, and take advantage of several access points throughout the site. So there will be off-site or off-street public parking available for visitors, as well as a secure parking lot for patrol and staff vehicles. So the building, you can see the heavy dashed line. That cuts through the plan. Thank you, Mark. So that is the line of demarcation between critical and non-critical, the addition and the existing. So what we tried to do as best as possible to alleviate, the 4-story circulation of the existing building, existing PD, functions are disjointed. It creates inefficiencies. So we allowed spaces to land where they would naturally optimize workflow and create adjacencies for mutual benefit between departments. The garages did drive quite a bit of it, but so the first slide on the existing, it was essentially one bay with 3 doors kind of kitty-cornered into each other. The Sally Port, the evidence, the specialty vehicles, all were in one bay. Current design standards, national standards, those all want to be separate. So the Sally Port then wants to be adjacent to patrol. Patrol wants to be next to holding, et cetera. So that really started to inform the plan in how everything laid out. Yeah.
Just some commentary on like what we saw in the previous building and some of the solutions that are represented here. Without the intention of speaking with the intention of protecting the police department in terms of their current operations and the risks they face, right? If we highlighted every deficiency, someone willing to do harm could leverage that to their advantage. But, for example, the current Sally Port is right in the mechanics maintenance shop. So you can imagine the amount of resources laying around a mechanics maintenance shop. Everything from a tire iron to a sledgehammer is within reach. So the amount of security challenges of an officer moving somebody through that area becomes difficult. The evidence is totally separated from the detention area, and then the patrol work area where the patrol officers are writing their reports are totally isolated. So this particular approach looks at things like a secured Sally Port that is immediately adjacent to the detention and holding areas. So when somebody's being processed, there is zero risk whatsoever at this point of somebody that has been detained running and crossing paths with someone that is a civilian employee of the police department. So we are separating those populations, and there's no way, I don't want to say no way, there's a way, there's a will, there's a way, but it would be substantially more difficult for one to attempt to harm an officer based on the way that the building is organized, or to escape the facility without authorization and run and jump the fence. So some of those features that Kelly is talking about in the plan, the evidence processing and storage area being immediately adjacent to the patrol zone, so that the officers can get back out to their community and on the street as quickly as possible, spending more time serving the community and the citizens and less time doing the administrative paperwork that is a huge time suck for their efforts. And what that translates to, we often look at the cost of a facility, but we don't necessarily consider the cost of human resources. So it makes their officers that much more effective at their jobs, and the more staff hours that you can place on the street and in service, the more efficient you are in terms of delivering those law enforcement services.
Thank you, Rob. Sorry, one back. Thank you, Mark. So the existing building also serves as the community entry point. There's a fantastic existing curved vestibule opening that we are preserving, and that creates the new welcoming entry point. And as Rob mentioned, that is then a dedicated public entry, with community resources directly off that lobby to minimize any crossover of populations that is undesirable or unsafe. We're also thinking ahead. With the city gave us strong direction on what their projections are. And back to one of my first statements is, we want this building to last its community another 50 plus years. So what do those numbers look like? How can we efficiently design a building to be cost effective, durable, with all the optimizations and efforts consolidated, so that these resources can continue to evolve, have room to grow if needed, or adapt. Again, we don't know what policing is going to look like in another 10, 20, 50 years. And another great feature dovetailed into that, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Dover Police Department. A member of our team who wasn't able to be here today was the architect on that, and it was completed about 10 years ago. And in there, they accounted for about 2,000 square feet of unbuilt shell space. They didn't know what they needed. And they also didn't know, cybersecurity, cyber crimes was a new thing. What was it going to be? So they kind of, budgeted, accounted for a little space for that at the very beginning of the project. And through the construction process, they finally were able to define that need for the cyber crimes unit to fill that space out. And so they were able to move in and have that space ready to go. 10 years down the road, they didn't know what that other shell space needed to be. Last year, they filled it out. It is now for their embedded social workers, now have an office within. And that was not something that was on anybody's radar as a part of a police and community service back then. So we took a page out of that book as well. There were some opportunities in the floor plan that presented itself for strategic shell space. Not a lot, but again, a little bit here and there to evolve to meet the needs of the community in the next few years or the next decade, who knows. So a lot of thoughtfulness and responsibility on the end of the city to acknowledge that they're planning on staying in this building and continuing to adapt it as they have with their current one for quite a while. So here it is. On the right, the existing insurance building should look pretty recognizable. It, as I mentioned, is a mid-century modern, beautiful example. The floor plan and structure lent itself very well to an open concept and allowed us to reestablish the footprint and the floor plan within to suit the administrative office and support office needs. A lot of beautiful materials are recaptured and preserved as well. So some granite stone veneer, some ashlar veneer, as well as the curtain wall system up above. Curtain wall system, the existing one, it was quite cutting edge for its time, but is thermally not great and deteriorating. However, it does make a beautiful statement on the building, and we as a group wanted to preserve that, to rebuild it with a much more thermally efficient, modern interpretation, but using that same vernacular. The third floor, which we call the penthouse, allows for some of the city offices that are currently out as leased space to be able to come home and be a part of the police department, and is a great cost-saving measure and a move on the city's part to consolidate those services. Nope, it is existing. Yes, yep. It's the prosecutor's office. Yep. And it speaks to the yes, departmental efficiency, as well as getting rid of that rent. So one of the things you'll notice is a lot of these rectangular volumes start to do some really cool slides with the geometry. You've got kind of a heavy stone base, this lighter glass top, and then kind of this metallic penthouse. And these are all existing gestures that we are reestablishing with new, more energy efficient materials. Safer materials. There is some ballistic glazing introduced in here as well. But those architectural gestures, we didn't want to put an addition on that tried to replicate or mimic or make it look like it was there originally. We took them as an homage. So the addition is 2 rectangular volumes that slide and have the masonry base and then the lighter metallic top. Again, we embraced the mandate of high durability, high longevity, and good thermal performance too. We want all the internal systems to be able to function optimally with great energy efficiency as well. This is a zoom into the front door. So this will be the public entry. Rob, if you want to speak to some of the
Sure. So some of the features. I mean, you saw the example. We talked about the crash-rated bollards, but some of the benches and the planters that you see there have some security features to them that lend themselves to some perimeter protection. But Kelly already did a wonderful job of talking about the materials, and one might think that the original Harriman architects that worked on this 60-some years ago, 50 years ago, had the foresight to say, hey, one day this is going to be a police station, because the utilization of things like stone on the ground level actually become advantageous to the utilization for a law enforcement facility. Nobody really wants to see the sally port from the outside, right? That's kind of a secure area. So the ground floor, when you look at the program, is largely a lot of those support and secure spaces, and the operational areas where we want people to know, hey, we're here, ends up leveraging to an advantage. And that also supports a security measure for the officers themselves by elevating them, makes them less prone to attack from the ground. So there's a lot of advantages that the existing building and the approach leverage. So that kind of approach in, obviously you see the flag, there's opportunities for anything from memorials to donor bricks, so on and so forth, in order to support the project. So, that kind of inviting and paying, as Kelly pointed out, homage to the original building and recognizing that the addition behind it kind of supports it.
So this is a view from the secure parking lot. You can see the garage bays that are now compartmentalized and dedicated. And this is, that sliding volume that I had mentioned, and backing up all of the critical facility aspects in those 2 volumes.
Is there a wall on this outside, so you don't actually see the police vehicles?
Yes, you're within. This view is from within a fenced area, but and I'm sorry, I do see your hand back there. Beth had asked that we hold questions to the end. Oh, sorry, sir. Please. Yes.
Let's hold questions.
Okay. Thank you. So, as I had mentioned, you know, we embraced a lot of, you know, modern, durable, long-lasting materials on the outside, but also on the inside. You know, we utilized a lot of systems, such as, I mean, LED lights, efficiency controls attached to those, low temp condensing boilers, modular chillers, low flow plumbing fixtures, just to name a few. It sorry, it all ties into more cost efficiencies for long-term cost implications as well for maintenance and yeah, maintenance costs. Sorry, which brings in us to.
Yeah, and so the one of the most cost-efficient things you can do is reuse some of the existing infrastructure. It's also one of the most sustainable things you can do. And so the idea of being able to leverage a building that's already built means we don't have to build a lot of structure and envelope that's already there. And so, but this is a little bit of an overview of kind of where this project's anticipated cost comes in, and also looking at it relative to some other benchmarks. And so the top on the bars here, we can just see that the Concord PD station is public safety station is this bar right here. These are relative cost per square foot numbers, and so just for comparison, the Salem, which is just starting construction right now, anticipated cost up over to on that edge of the bar. So the shorter the bar is, the less expensive. Longer bars are more expensive. Tilton, New Hampshire, comes in a relative similar cost structure, and then working with Rob and his exposure to regional and national considerations. One is in Massachusetts, where things, different construction markets and things are a little bit more expensive on that side of the border. But then looking at it at a regional average too is here. So the telltale on this is that really by leveraging efficient systems, by leveraging existing facilities that already exist, we're able to deliver the square foot needs to the community at a lower cost than if you had to construct all this brand new. So that's one of them. We've talked a little bit about, Kelly just mentioned some of the other ways that we're looking at cost efficiency, and we're continuing to evaluate ways that we can continue to keep the cost at a point where it's leveraging community resources in the best possible way.
Some just general commentary on cost. You know, the interesting part for me is the 4 sample projects listed, the 3 sample projects listed below the regional average. My firm has had absolutely nothing to do with those, but that actually tracks with what we've seen in New England all the way down through the Mid-Atlantic. New construction costs for law enforcement facilities are now pushing on average between $700 and $900 a square foot in today's market. Well, we're designing something today to be built 12 to 18 months from now in a midpoint of construction, and the escalation rate has been about 5%. So that means that, you know, the power of compounding interest is great in our 401ks and our IRAs, but it's not so great in construction costs. So that's what we're seeing today. What this should really be telling the community is that the existing building has helped in the way that it's been leveraged to support the department's needs for the next 50 plus years. You've already digested the vast majority of the site development costs. The utilities, the infrastructure are already in play. It's being expanded upon. So you're leveraging an investment that was made 50 years ago that somebody else made in the acquisition of that building to do it and deliver it at a lower cost than what other contemporary departments are doing across the country. The other thing that Kelly kind of alluded to in the design of the building is often, you know, I refer to costs as an iceberg. And the public perception, which is you all, of course, is what we see is what is the tip of the iceberg. And that's generally the construction costs themselves. Well, what lies below the surface is often what ends up sinking a ship, right? And that's probably what the city manager is most concerned with, which is, well, where do we stand 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? What are our energy efficiency systems? We could put apartment window shakers in these buildings, and they'll last for 5 years, and you'll have to replace them, and the cost of operating them is going to be through the roof. Or we can do a system that is going to balance and ensure high indoor air quality and last 20 years, 30 years with appropriate service life, and control those costs. So the idea really behind a lot of this is to find best value, which is why the construction manager has been involved, to make sure that we're balancing and looking at different options. And so I would say, from hopefully, I recognize that being part of this team lends some bias, but from a national perspective, you guys are getting an extremely good value for what is being delivered given what you see nationwide. And oftentimes I will hear people say, well, so-and-so just did a building for X. Well, just often ends up being 10 years ago, because time slips away and we forget how quickly the sands of time trickle on. So as we're comparing things and we're looking through things, it's really important to normalize what today's cost would be with today's market conditions, so on and so forth. So I can say with a high degree of confidence that if this project is delivered at $643 a square foot, you're getting it at a significant value.
Moving forward, where we're at, we will be presenting to City Council Tuesday night. This is a constant, it's a living document. This process that we're going through, we're still trying to do some value engineering, cut some costs before we give an actual cost estimate to City Council next Tuesday. Yes, that's soon, but we're working away at trying to get a better value for that and trying to understand some savings, grant opportunities, and everything like that, so you can see what the implications will be for taxpayers in the future. So that'll be coming to City Council on Tuesday night next week during their regular meeting. We have a website. I'm not sure if anybody's been to it yet, but concordnh.gov, new police station, where we've been trying to put information out there on the process of the project. There's a great video that we did with Concord TV, interviewing the chief and Deputy Chief Moulton, going through the existing station. It's about 7 minutes long. It should be up on the website right now. If nobody's seen it yet, it's a great way to see actually what's happening inside there and get a firsthand view of some of the things that the consultants have talked about tonight. We have some FAQs on there as well, just some things to think about, what's going to happen to the existing building. So there is a master plan going on right now of what's going to happen to that building. The goal is to bring the Human Services, or the welfare office, is down on Horseshoe Pond Lane. We'd like to bring that back downtown. So looking to move them back onto the campus, and to get maybe perhaps a better council chamber, more spaces that are accessible to the public. So we're looking at that right now. So it'll be more expanding into using that space for other city services. What's the biggest challenge? It's fiscal responsibility. We're trying to get the best building. We're needed this. This is a once in a multi-generational project that we're working on right now. We went through this process 50 years ago. Here we are again doing this. So we want to make sure that we have a great building for the next 50 years, that our police department doesn't grow out of in 5 years. It's something that they can serve our community well into the future when we're no longer here. And then what are the benefits to the community? I think they've talked about a lot of, we've provided better spaces, a better experience when you're going into the police station, a much more comfortable. We've separated services. We've added social workers, so it'll be better spaces for them instead of what they're working in right now. There'll be a multi-purpose room where they can have meetings. Retired police officers can come back. We can have Cub Scout, Boy Scout, Girl Scout meetings there, or other community meetings there. So trying to pull the community in and make that they are a big part of our community, but we want people to feel welcome in this space. So upcoming meetings, Tuesday night City Council, we will be asking council to set a public hearing for November to appropriate funds so we can move forward with finishing the design so we can start construction next spring. That's the goal right now. I think next slide. So now we're going to open up for feedback. So just want to point out other members of the audience that we have here tonight. We have our mayor, current mayor, Champlin over there, and several members of City Council, if you want to raise your hand. If current councilors that will be looking at this, if you want to talk to them afterwards or outside of the meeting tonight, and then we're all here tonight as well for questions. We have a general email address, feedback@concordnh.gov. That goes to Jay and I. If you have any questions, if you want to email us, and go to our website and learn more there. So with that, we'll open it up for questions. Yes.
Did, in the bar chart, did the square foot cost account for the cost of the building?
It did not. The question was, did the cost account for the acquisition of the property of the building?
Was there a comparison made that did?
There's, no, not yet, but we can do that if that's,
Could I tag on just one more question?
yes.
What's the gross square footage of the new building?
It's around 70,000 square feet,
And the existing is,
around 20,000 square feet. Oh, I'm sorry, the existing police station or the existing 4 Booton Street building?
the existing police station.
It's about 20,000 square feet.
What percentage of the program is expansion space?
Stats.
So the question was what's expansion space? My understanding of that question is what space is left that isn't currently going to be built out for possible future use?
Yeah, that would be available for future use, whatever it's currently.
There'll be about 1,700 square feet that will be in the building but won't be finished, so that would be available for future use. Similar to the question that was, the point that was brought up about Dover.
Okay, the first question is, my understanding is the officers have computers in their cars. They don't go to the station to write their reports. Is this true or no?
That might be a police department question.
Yeah, they have computers in their cars, but a lot of that is when they're coming off shift and somebody's getting in that car, they need a workspace at the conclusion of their shift to finish their reports.
And the other question I have is, it seems like when this project was originally proposed, the police station was going to grow by a relatively small percentage. I think that our architect here has pointed that out, sort of, as in originally was going to be a huge amount of extra space in the existing building, and a small addition. Now it's like there's a huge addition, plus you're filling up the existing building. You're expanding the police by 3 times. I mean, isn't that kind of excessive?
That's a great question. So oftentimes, one of the key program elements, can we go back to the floor plan diagrams? We're not, in the spirit of transparency, we're not giving all of the details of the plan. I hope you can appreciate that in terms of where every room is and what it is for the sake of protecting the officers that are assigned there. At some point, if those floor plans became available to somebody, again, that wished to cause harm, they could exploit that to their advantage. But the key point here is a lot of this rear area stuff on the first floor. There's a lot of bay space, as you saw in the renderings. And so one of the key things to take into consideration, we've got secure parking now, which was not in the current facility that the police department has. But one of the key areas that's lacking is an evidence processing bay. So lots of technology goes into that for lab processing, lots of perimeter for that to happen. Evidence storage, so if there's a vehicle that's been used in a hit and run, there's space assigned to that so the evidence doesn't become degraded. There are Sally ports there now that hold multiple vehicles. Right now there's one at best, if you want to call that a Sally port, and what is in the current facility. So a large percentage of the program area is dedicated to storage and bay space. And that is probably the largest percentage of increase that is not currently in existence in the existing facility. What we also see in the holding area or in the processing area now are additional holding areas that support sight and sound separation. And the reason for that is it is mandated that juveniles and adults be separated from one another, that they never are in the same space. As you can probably imagine, that can create some issues. And that males and females also be separated from sight and sound in order to mitigate that risk. At times, there are also circumstances in which multiple people, we're all going to get a little rowdy later, right? We're going to go into custody. And what the police department doesn't want us to do is to talk through open bars and say, Mark, we got to have our story straight, right? Chief's going to come ask us a question in an interview room later. So the sight and sound separation helps them maintain the integrity of getting the information that they need to determine whether or not they're going to take it to the prosecutor's office, and it's going to go from there. In addition, what's not really captured in that 20,000 square feet of existing building is the crammed in ad hoc spaces that they created. That 20,000 is gross square feet. That does not capture the what I would consider to be an extra 4,000 square feet of hodgepodge mezzanine that they've pulled off in order to store evidence. So now there's proper evidence storage that will allow for future expansion through things like, oh my God, why am I drawing a blank? High density file storage, high density evidence storage. The other areas that are not in the existing building but woefully inadequate are the forensics crime area, the computer forensics area. We had the privilege of touring that area. The amount of heat that the computers and devices that they put out that are in that area are absolutely absurd. And the working conditions that that particular department is dealing with, not that the police department, but that division is working in, is extremely difficult. There are some very sensitive systems in there, and I'm not talking electronics, I'm talking sensitive with access to things like child exploitation, and making sure that those people are brought to justice in an appropriate way. And those things need to be separated and segregated from the rest of the department. So there's a lot of physical barriers and protections within the building, as well as operational barriers and protection. Some of the other things that we see that work their way into the program, utilizing the existing building, the community room, right? Meeting rooms and training spaces. There's a training space. There will be, there's a vision to bring in what's called a FATS simulator, which is a firearm training simulator or use of lethal force, that will help ensure that the officers that serve this community are more up to date and more trained through practice and scenario-based training, that, God willing, that if they have to ever use force, it will be in an appropriate time and an appropriate place, because they will have additional training and additional exposure to do that. So that is just a handful of those things that explain that.
You're not answering my question. You're giving a marketing spiel. What I asked was, why has this been discovered? We pay someone to do a study of the existing building and see how much it needs to be added. And now we suddenly discover a whole bunch more needs to be added. Are we going to fire this person? Are we going to sue them? What about this person that told us that we didn't need so much in this space?
They didn't say we didn't need that space. So they were hired to do a feasibility study to see if we could fit something on that property, if we could use that property. So the goal was to say, hey, can we actually develop this property to meet the needs of a police station? They did a very quick study just to make sure that we could actually do it. We've come across, we've done soil analysis that has led us to some things that weren't part of that initial study. We've had a national expert on board to help us. A lot of the things that he was talking about are things that we had to address for the police station to meet accreditation standards that made larger spaces that were originally contemplated as part of the original study. The category 4, the building standards, that the current building, they did not do as part of that study seismic studies on that. So that was done after, where we brought structural engineers on board. So that moved some of the stuff that we thought we could fit inside of 4 Boonton Street, the existing building. We had to move it into an addition where it wasn't contemplated as part of that original study. So that was just a first flush say, hey, can we actually make this site work? Yes, we can make this work. Now let's bring all the experts on board. Not that they weren't experts, but they didn't address all of these things that he just talked about. And we're still able to fit it on the property, and that's what we're working with right now.
I mean, I guess that's the answer I was looking for, is that we made sure never to hire this previous expert ever again.
I think they did the job that they were hired for. Tom?
Is there, to have something useful for the city council, is there a way you guys could take office space to office space? So here's what we have now, as far as, here's what we have for locker room space, here's what we have for training space, here's what we have for Sally Port space, here's what we have for evidence storage space, and just do a simple analysis. Say, right now we have the existing station has X amount of square footage set aside under the plan for female officers, which I know the answer is 0. This is what it's going to be under the new plan. Here's what a Sally Port is. Here's what's going to be under the new. Just so I think when the council's looking at it, because I think the big question is when you start adding all these things up, the question is going from 20,000 square feet to 70,000 square feet. How do you get there? And I think if you look at, I think you got to break it down into pieces, and if people can look at it and say, okay, the evidence storage for everything that we have right now, the things we have to keep forever. What is that going to be? What does that need to be in the future? Based on growth, based on changes in the law, how long you have to hold on to things. I think that would be useful in terms of add them all up and say, okay, this is what needs to happen. Then of course, look at the seismic issues. I'd say right now, I don't know, regarding this building here, does that meet any of the seismic standard buildings? It doesn't, so okay. So forget about accreditation and forget about safety going forward. And this new building, you have to have, what's the minimum amount that we need to have going? I think that would be useful for council to look at and say, be able to break it down into pieces and say what's absolutely needed and what could be put off for a future date cost.
Yeah, and we have some examples.
And just to expand on it, I think that's something that can be done. Another data point that's been useful.
I think it's something that could be done. And another data point that could be useful if somehow you could drudge it up through the records division from 1975 is how many officers were sworn, how many civilian staff did you have, and how many calls for service were there in 1975? Because what is often lost through time is, in 1976, were you already out of space? And have you been forced to kind of deal with this? And now we've just finally burst at the seams and we are where we are. So that is part of, maybe the analysis as well, is where were you historically compared to where we are now?
I have a question about how the building will be egressed and entered. There seems to be a new opening down on the south side.
So the question was, how will the property be entered and accessed from? So we're using all the same curb cuts. So right now, this is an existing, I think it's just a one-way in right now on the southern part off of Booton Street. They come off there right now. There's a little connection down to the Lutheran Church. There's a gate right there. So there is we have Jersey barriers across it right now.
Our exit there is.
No, there's an entrance in right now, but we've added an exit out. That's one thing that we're studying with the traffic engineers right now, if we're going to keep that as an in out or just leave it as an in. We're working with, there's actually a study going on right now about the traffic light, so we're coordinating with that. But we're sort of reconfiguring the entrance right here, but that will still be the same entrance and access at the lighted intersection there. And then this will stay that same off of the old North Main State Street.
That gate going to be open?
This gate will not be open. Nope. It'll be for police officers only.
For police officers?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Did you have one more question? Or?
yeah, I'm a butter in the back.
Yep.
And one of the questions I have, that is a historic district. And the chain link fence that was put up there was never received any okay, I think, from the historic district. It was put up by the insurance company. I think out of consideration for the neighborhood, there could be a fence that maybe gives some homage to the mid-century, but also would look nice for the historic district. And I wondered what you had in mind.
That is a wonderful suggestion. Beth and I have presented early concepts to the Heritage Commission because you are absolutely correct. While the building itself is not a part of the historic district, the line is like 10 feet off the building edge, and it does cross the property. So that is a fantastic. We are looking at fences right now. Yes, 8 feet is the number that is recommended as standard for screening, for acoustics, and for privacy as well. And the style, though, is we will definitely take that into consideration. Thank you.
The other thing that's a little confusing in your presentation is you talked about the call numbers going up, but just for the sake of accuracy, I believe the call numbers for Concord have actually gone down in the last 2 years.
I'll let the chief answer that question.
So call numbers are an interesting statistic, and it's something that we like to keep track of. They're roughly the same. They kind of been leveled out in the last few years, especially since COVID.
It said the last 2 years have gone down by about 10,000.
Well, I don't think it's gone down that much, but certainly COVID, the 2020, the numbers were down. One of the things that we have to bear in mind too when we look at calls for service is who is generating these calls for service, right? And right now, I think we've counted that we have 19 police officers that are not. Of that 90, there's 19 that are not generating calls for service by way of vacancies or being at the police academy. So once we're at full staff, a lot of the call volume will actually increase because they self-generate a lot of those numbers. One of the other things that we track as well is we look at the time an officer, when they arrive at a call until the time they clear. We want to know how much time they actually spend on that call. And it's about 43,000 hours a year just on a call. And that's to what Rob is saying. A lot of our calls are becoming more and more complex. And so they're spending much more time at a single call. And it doesn't necessarily, for instance, we had a homicide in Concord a few years ago, and that's one call for service. But think about the thousands of hours that took place after that call was cleared. So we have to look at all of the statistics that go into that call.
But I'm sure the community will be looking at those numbers that are in the report.
Sure.
Just for accuracy.
Yeah, no,
and
that's fair.
presentation. The other thing, do you have enough parking spaces? I mean, you
At
have
the
to-
existing facility, no.
No, there. If you have the vehicles that are police vehicles and people are bringing their vehicles to work, and then you have public vehicles coming in, do you have enough?
You're gonna make me answer this question? No, we're working on that. Yes, we're squeezing every inch out of the site as we possibly can. There may be during shift changes that there may be people end up parking out on Old North State Street there, but
So does that mean that police officers will be entering and exiting through North State Street? That was mentioned.
potentially they'll use both. That'll be a policy decision once it opens. There'll be a gate here for them to enter and a
So they'll
gate
have to
there.
go to the fire station and turn left and hit that intersection and push.
If that's the direction that they're going to be using, yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. This is the first public information, right? Yes,
Public information, yes, yeah.
Oh, yes. So, thanks, good job. I think many in the city, we're well aware that this has been forthcoming the last couple of years. I don't think any of us question the need for a new building, but I am really surprised at the expediency in the timeline that it's going to be put out to bid and then subject to construction in the spring of next year. So again, not questioning the need or thereabouts and the severe limitations the existing department. But I wish there were more public information meetings. Since there's going to be a meeting next month, November, you said on the budget, so I take it there's going to be, let's have this be a quick response. So I take it council's going to vote on the budget, yay or nay, correct? So
Yes.
I would suggest, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manager, that because of the importance of this and the price on this, taken collectively with every other capital project we have, that we have you structure the council such that the meeting such that it starts an hour and a half earlier, and it'd be just information meeting number 2 for the public, should they want to attend, and for council, because they're going to have updated numbers, updated figures. So it started early, and then you convene your regular meeting at 7. and then have the vote, or defer it by a month or two to get more answers. On the addition, I take it the site has a lot of limitations in terms of expanding beyond what's there. So I'm hoping, I'm suggesting, that part of that building, perhaps the rear half, be structured, designed structurally such that you can do this is a concept, take a third of that space, you can always add a decade, 15 years down the road, you can do a third floor addition. So it'd be structurally sound and footing wise, such that you can go upward with another addition, rather than having to go through this another 40, 50 years from now and say, hey, we gotta move again. And I'm sure I missed a few things. I have so many things going around in my head, but hopefully the glass that is there now, which will be changed to be bulletproof, hopefully the color is changed to make it more, to me, accommodating, more personally pleasing. This building now, to me, is ugly. Reminds me of the Employment Security Center down on South Main Street. So, but with that, so with those suggestions, I hope it's considered. It's a lot to digest. And again, we all are sensitive to taxing. Mr. Mayor, I know, so maybe can this be done transitionally? That's the last point. Can we build the addition, but it not be fully, we do a knockout wall such that 3/4 of it is built now, 1/4 is left for a decade from now, and we kind of share the space between the present building and the new one. Normally that's gonna cost more in total in the long run, but we're going to jam here at the city of Concord. We're gonna eat a lot of yogurt the next 5 years. So.
Tom, did you?
I just wanted, do you mind if I answer some of the questions? So for Mr. Rader's question, so the city council already has a meeting at 5:30 on Tuesday. Then they're gonna have the regular 7 o'clock meeting. Then there'll be a full presentation at the end of that meeting. So 8 o'clock, let's say. There'll be Beth will do a full presentation on that. Then all they're going to do is set it down for a public hearing for a month later. It'll be out there for 5 weeks or so. City council will have a public hearing, and then it's up to city council to decide if they're comfortable and they have enough information to make a decision. They make a decision. If they don't, it goes to the next meeting. If they don't, it goes to the next meeting. And that's no different than what was done with the Main Street project or the Heights Community Center project or every other project. It's all up to city council when they got to the point where they've taken enough public input and they're comfortable making a decision.
I understand that, but what I'm also stating is that this is too close in timeline and proximity. I think you should be aware in the last 2-3 years, more of the public wants to have greater input prior to 2 months before a final vote on a multi-million-dollar project that will impact the city for decades. So that's my point.
Just a quick comment to that. I think, especially on something like a public safety project, requires a lot of community engagement. But every sword has two sides to it, right? And so, just some food for thought on. And I only speak from experience. There's a project in Maine that we were involved with back in 2018. They started the project. Paralysis by analysis is a very real epidemic amongst communities nationwide. And so to put it to measure, right, $10 million worth of debt service on a building at 5% increase equates to a substantial sum of money, $500,000 per year increase per 10. If you divide that to a monthly sum, it's roughly $46,000 per month of inaction. So my point to that being is that there is a fine line and a balance between taking enough time to let the ideas marinate and having the community involved and the community engaged, and balancing the needs of maintaining forward momentum so that what is, and I'm not saying this project is 10 million, what is 10 doesn't become 20, and then 20 doesn't become 80, and 80 doesn't become 160. So it's just some counterpoints. I'm not trying to argue that, because I think community engagement is critically important, but there's a balance there.
before. My name is Lisa, and I'm very grateful for the Concord Police Department and the what you all do. Thank you. I do want to add that New Hampshire crime statistics have gone down since 2016, and we do in fact have the second lowest crime rate in the nation. So our crime rates are going down. I mention this because there is a sort of militarization going on of police departments, and that I worry about, for instance, that impact on the visuals. What is the fence gonna look like? How is that gonna change the neighborhood? The indoor shooting range, laser, what was that?
It's a firearms training simulator, so it's not an active,
Right.
it's not
so,
live fire.
No,
or
no,
anything.
but just that leads into my next point. I'm wondering, will there be ad alternates in the budget that goes to the city council, or is it gonna be all or nothing? So that if, for instance, they don't want, the city council says no thank you to the laser training components, we'll use that space for the future, will there be a list of ad alternates?
Yes, that's what we're working on right now.
Okay,
Yes.
and will there be an early bid package option to help incentivize making sure that we don't delay such that we add on $30 million because we waited 2 years? Is that gonna be something that happens?
No, we don't anticipate an early bid package. The schedule that was noted on there, as Mr. Rayner noted, is fairly aggressive, but it's definitely reasonable. We don't see that there would be a need for an early bid package. We wouldn't see any savings that would come from that. And I think that we're also just, if we look at some of the costs that are involved, we want to be able to kind of keep moving forward on this.
Right. And then in terms of alternative energies, is there any plan for solar, because there are some rebates and tax incentives that expire next July, so those systems may be zero cost in the end, so what's?
So, when we first started with this project, obviously that was one of the questions we looked at, was what would be possible. If we can go back a couple of slides and see the rendering from the street view, I think you might see some of the challenges we're facing. If we look at the what we're calling the penthouse, where ideally the prosecutor will be, the light is actually rendered fairly accurately here. So the ability to get any meaningful solar on this lot would be really, really tough. I think on the rooftop, because this section of right along the crest there was actually the windows for the third floor. So it pretty much precludes any kind of solar on a good 50% of the existing building. On the new building, the orientation's slightly better, but it's also lower. And a lot of the mechanical air handling equipment is on the roof. We wanted to get it out of the building so that we could use that space more effectively. So there's not a lot of roof space. And I think, as you know, a lot of the rebates that are going quick.
But
So
given the timeline, I didn't know if they might intersect.
perhaps, but I think that was something we need to be looking at in context of the whole project and not as a one-off. So nothing is going to preclude any kind of solar work going forward other than the parameters that are based on the building. And again, we're looking for the best value here to maximize the space, and that involves some funky angles and sight lines.
And what will the energy source be?
We will look at electric and natural gas. So the heating system will be mostly natural gas and all electric for everything else.
And also just to piggyback off of efficiency, but that training room, it is not just for that type of simunitions training. It will also host training, everybody sitting at lecture tables, getting their accreditation. It is also designed to host RAD training, so that is self-defense for the community. They will host it in that room, so it's not just the simunitions. It is a Swiss Army knife of a room, and you've been waiting patiently.
When you were talking about accreditation before, were you talking about the facilities? And if so, yeah.
Keep going.
So if so, were we talking about something that's more like meeting national standards or being in lawful compliance? And if we're talking about the latter, are you suggesting that the current building is not within compliance?
So I'll let Chief speak to CALEA specifically, and how it affects the department and accreditations and the lawfulness. But so I will speak from a designer's perspective. CALEA is this funky manual to us as designers that say things like an officer shall not have a firearm on their person while handling or moving someone that has been detained. Right. So what that says to us as a designer is, there's no standard in CALEA that says the architect shall design a building that does X, Y, and Z. We have to use our creative brains, read the black and white language that CALEA establishes from an operational protocol standpoint and say, well, in order to comply with this, we need to make sure we have handgun lockers in the sally port and in the processing area so that, the lieutenant or sergeant or officer that has someone detained can secure their handgun before they remove someone from the vehicle and then move them for the reasons that, whatever CALEA has specified that to be the national standard, presumably being, well, we don't want someone to wrestle the firearm away from an officer and then use it in a violent manner. However, there are many, many examples of that through CALEA. Another one would be sight and sound separation, or that interview rooms shall be acoustically isolated from one another. It doesn't specifically say that it needs an STC rating of 54 with hardware and door drops and all of these acoustical parameters that an architect would know how to install. So it becomes the fusion of an operational accreditation and a department from an operational accreditation standpoint to make sure that the facilities are in a position to support said accreditation. Hopefully I've answered that portion of the question. And Chief, I don't know if you want to chime in any more on that.
Yes, I think what national accreditation speaks to, really the overarching theme is strictly safety. So they want to make sure that your facility is designed for safe transport of people throughout the building, that the workers in the building are safe, and a lot of that has to do with these sally ports, weapon retention, not able to take people that are being detained and just walk them through the building. You want to have a really short ingress into the holding room. So that's what accreditation, that's the overarching theme. And when it comes to building security, but by and large, 95% of accreditation standards are all policy driven. And it's that other 5% that when New Hampshire set the standards for New Hampshire accreditation, they eliminated all the building standards that CALEA or the national accreditation would do, because probably 75% of the police departments that exist here in New Hampshire, they don't have the infrastructure to achieve accreditation nationally. And right now, I think there's only about 12 to 16 New Hampshire police departments that are accredited.
What are the consequences of not meeting accreditation?
None. You're just not living up to the national standards, that's it. We're constantly trying to. Yes, we are in the process of doing New Hampshire accreditation right now. Well, it's a building block, right? So New Hampshire, there's about 115 standards, and for the first tier of national, it's about 180. And so once you achieve your New Hampshire accreditation, it makes that, it's really a bridge to national accreditation.
So is what you're saying right now we're in lawful compliance because the accreditation is mostly procedural, but that in following those procedures, you're meeting barriers that the new building is meant to solve and essentially make the job or make following those protocols easier?
So the existing building is lawfully compliant. Would accreditation look at that? Would an assessor come into the 35 Green Street and say this meets our standard? Probably not.
Thank you.
2 points. One, I'm disappointed there isn't some solar design on the building. If something can be changed around on the roof, to at least put some solar up there. I don't think a building should be built right now without that added to it. And two, as I read it earlier, this police department building is at 20,000 square feet, and we should be at 27,000 to be right now. I think that's what I read in the paper. 27,000 was like the minimum we should have. We're adding 20,000. We had 38,000. I'm hoping that a lot of that building is going to be bringing other departments into it, so we're not spending a lot of money on rentals and so forth across it. Am I out of line with that, or?
So I think the 27,000 was that from the 2021. So there was a study. Okay, so in 2021 there was a study that was done of the existing facility, and they were looking at if we stayed here, what's the minimum amount we could add, and we could meet the needs of the police station. It was up to 27,000, so it would be an addition that they could do, but then it was determined no, that's not going to work out. We're not going to spend all this money for an addition and grow out of it in a month. So that's when they pivoted from using the existing facility to looking at another space in the community. So it did grow, and Mr. Schweiker alluded to the other study that was done in 2024, where they identified the amount of space that was needed at the new facility, and that did not include a lot of space to grow into, so the shell spaces that we've talked about. We've brought the prosecutors.
So what was the number that they came up with that we need? If 27,000 wasn't the number, what is the number that we need?
I know this is not going to answer your question at all. If we were building from scratch, it probably would be, I think it was around 40,000. But because we're using an existing building, it's actually going to be bigger because a lot of the facilities have to go into the category 4 new addition.
I understand that.
Yes.
So that extra
30,000
feet, what are we going to do with it? We can't leave it sit empty. We don't need that much space. So is there a plan to use that for other?
Yes, the building is completely designed out. So there's only 1,700 square feet of that, the existing plus the addition.
So we're
that's
planning
going to
on
be shell.
bringing other departments.
The prosecutor's office is coming there. So that right now, the top floor. So they're getting 3,000 square feet. Just because of design, the penthouse, it made more sense just to have their department alone up there. Maybe they only need 1,500 square feet, which is what they have now, but they're going to expand.
That's still leaving for 20,000 more. You're
But
at
there's
70,000, 3,000.
Yes, but we are expanding it. So we're able to have a training room and a multi-purpose room. So now those are two different things. Those were not contemplated, though. We don't need a training room and a multi-purpose room. Right now, they're using it for about 15 different uses. They're multi-purpose training, evidence room altogether. So if you looked at the minimum, what's the minimum that we need? Say it was a certain amount of square feet, but because we have the space in the existing building at 4 Boonton Street, we're able to have this larger multi-purpose room where they can bring the crime line group that comes together and spills that space.
Very low waste of space.
I won't say that. I'm just asking that it's not just, we're just gonna have it, we don't really need it. I mean, a big room is great, but you want to let people go trickers into the building when it's a police station.
Well, I think maybe the chief can give a good example about the existing building, about the genesis of that, how that was designed. Would you think that would be helpful?
I don't care about the old building, I know it's too small.
Yeah, well, I think it's
so I'm saying now what we're building is 70,000 square feet. We need 35,000 for a police station and 3,000 for the adjudication office up there. that still needs a big piece of, big piece, 20,000 square feet can have a big conference room. Big
Well, it's for many, so we're able to provide a staff hub for the staff. So retention and recruitment is a huge thing. Showing up to work there every day is depressing in the current space. So we're trying to create a space for all the officers so they can have that interaction, both civilian staff and patrol staff, to come in an area and have a space. We're designing it to the best we can, given the parameters that we have in existing building. Yes, it's bigger than what we need, but we have to meet international building code with the things that are in the additional space.
I just said, we're gonna bring other people in to fill that empty space.
Yes, we
Not
are.
just have an empty space with a big conference room.
No, it's completely designed out, and there are other offices coming to that space.
I missed it.
Okay. Yes.
The big monkey in the room is why I came here to begin with, was that one slide that shows the existing building and then the add-on. And to your question, it's blatantly obvious there's a lot more space than what we need. I think, I keep my taxes low. That's my top priority. I think, I'm a skeptic. Most of you know me. I'm a skeptic. I think you did a good enough job to explain you got the sale.
Thank you. Thanks.
Beth and Jay, I talked to you last week, thank you for stopping by. I know you answered my question, but they were very positively excited today. There's zero chance that they'll demo the whole existing building. Zero chance.
Correct.
Well, it belongs to the city of Concord. That's
So is there any possibility that anything could happen in the next few months during the design process where you could say, we can't proceed? I don't see any roadblock.
Not with the existing buildings, that's your question is.
Right. There's not gonna be something that comes along and says, all of a sudden, we can't do what we want to do with that.
No, and we've done a lot of evaluation of the existing building, and a lot of it structurally we've looked at it. We looked at the soils in and around the building. We've looked at all the different systems that are supporting. We looked at how we're touching onto the existing building. So no, it is the design intent is absolutely to keep that building.
Now, in terms of site improvements beyond the facility, who's leading that effort?
That would be us.
It's the city, right? So specifically what I talked to you about was the retaining wall.
Yes.
That's part
Yeah, that's something we'll be talking about in detail.
And to speak to the existing building, I'm usually the biggest skeptic of an existing building, right? Oh, great. And just to be facetious a little bit, oh, here's another city that bought another pre-engineered metal building or existing building, or the old fire station that's 100 years old and they want to turn it into a police station. This building works. It fits the needs of the program. It's got the dimension. I mean, usually a building that's 50 years old, we're looking at like 10-foot floor-to-floor heights. And I'm like, there's no way you're getting an HVAC system in here. The building has all of the bones that are necessary to work. There, in my opinion, is zero reason to tear it down. And it would be a real shame to do that.
So, just to, going back to parking, I still don't see where, there's no parking on North State.
One of the elements of parking, and Chief, you might chime in, there's some specialized vehicles that take up a lot of space in some of these lots. And those specialized vehicles, which are very expensive, are now in the building in order to prolong their life. So it makes the parking lot itself a little bit more efficient. And I don't remember the... Yep.
Account for the secure parking, and then you look at the other spaces.
The public.
Right. Public safety, yeah.
Right now they have 37 parking spaces. We're over 94, I believe, public spaces. That'll be on the whole lot. So there'll be opportunity for, pretty much everything along here is all public parking. So there'll be patrol vehicles are in here,
Right,
and
I
then
was
staff.
told there'd be about 50 to 60 people during regular working hours.
Yep. So there's 95 parking spaces on site.
There's 95?
Yep.
How many is the secure?
Well, the secure will include staff as well.
It's not.
It's not just for patrol, it includes staff as well. I saw another hand somewhere. Oh, yes.
Thank you, Beth. I understand that the goal is to meet CALIA accreditation, and it sounds like some of the plan was built around that goal. Is there possibly any cost savings in this plan? Should we not base this around the goal of CALIA accreditation and sort of just try to meet best standards in safety?
It's actually not CALIA, it's international building code that we have to meet. So that's what's driving the larger part of the building. So I think it's most, as the chief alluded to, it's mostly policy based, so we can achieve it. But if you, did you want to add something?
The Kalia stuff is just about being thoughtful in how the spaces are organized and being adjacent to one another. So it's not like we're adding any extra square footage or any, in many instances, if we were to zoom into the details of the plan, the processing area where evidence and people are processed and detained is immediately adjacent to the Sally Port, therefore eliminating corridor space, which in turn drives square footage up. So a lot of the best practices, just following best practices. Well, Kalia and best practices are somewhat synonymous with one another. And so what this design process has endeavored to do is, find the best applicable approach given the existing building that we have in order to make sure that current operational efficiency is made as effective as possible and to make sure that the officers are afforded the safest work environment that they can to do their job without taking them off of the street for prolonged periods of time.
One last question. Do you expect any communication towers or satellite dishes?
At this point, no. There'll probably be a small antenna. We're actually in the process of finding the site for that. It would be very small. Most of the communication will continue to come out of the existing building.
And internally, the most you'd probably see is like an antenna rail on the roof and maybe a microwave dish out to the lot to download the dash cam footage automatically, but that's, we're still in the process of sorting all that out. But nothing like you won't have like a 200-foot tall communication tower on site.
Go ahead.
Was I understanding that another part of it is that you're building out an addition and that has to do with the financing? Did you say something about it impacting the financing, whether or not there was an addition?
No, sorry. Councilor Grady Sexton asked if we didn't meet some of the Kalia standards, if we could have some savings and not build them out. But I was saying anything that we're building out is to meet International Building Code, so we can't cut it necessarily to cut savings. If that's, yeah.
So in order to, can you just go in a little bit further about what about it makes it meet building code?
We'll let one of the architects give up.
And Rob could jump in here as well. So the addition is built to be the last building standing in the event of a serious catastrophic issue. And that is driven by codes. Category 4 is very clear about what type of materials we're allowed to use, what structural standards we need to meet. The existing building, unfortunately, does not meet those. So any of the critical support facility or support departments like dispatch, patrol, those individuals need to be able to stay operational no matter what. So they automatically need to be in the critical facility.
I mean, that pretty much covers it. It's the risk category 4 stuff. It's the last building standing. In the event that the ground shakes, and most people say, oh, not here, but there is a fault line that runs down the East Coast. In the event that there's a major seismic event or blizzards with unprecedented snow load, the intent is that, and the codes are what describe this, not the panel of us up here. Trust me, I wish at times we had some, the ability to leverage some common sense, but the building code is the building code. And the reality is what a community does not want is call 911. Well, we're sorry, we're unable to respond because A, we don't have a dispatch center, and B, the building that houses all of our police officers just collapsed around them. And we can actually look, a fire department recently in Buffalo just collapsed last winter with heavy snow load. Fortunately, they were all outside, but there's a video of it that's on the news, and you can watch the thing collapse. So if you think of what that impact has and why the codes exist, well, now so many square miles are without fire protection coverage for a sustained period of time. They lost their engines, except for the ones that were pulled out, and they lost their home. So now there's a strain that's faced on the community. And the intent is to make sure that those essential services can continue to provide their surrounding, community in that event something like that happens.
Yeah, I'm only concerned about 2 things. By the way, great job. Thank you so much for this. One is sustainability. I want to see something that would invest in the future of our community and of policing. I think I think we need to look into more into the solar system. You said you're going to use a lot of electricity mostly. I think you need to look into more into solar system so we can invest more in future. You know, we can invest once and have something in future that is going to bring more in our community. Second is you mentioned something about bringing the community together, right? And there's going to be like a lot of space for the community, right? And I want to hear more your plan to make sure that that's more sustainable, and in the future that is not taken away or because of more things coming in or more policing or more offices or something. I'll give you an example. I went to Concord High School. I used to participate in a lot of clubs, and some of those clubs were more new Americans because I couldn't. I wanted to adopt, and eventually after that, there's more programs that came. Just an example, CRTC program, which I did participate in that. I saw a lot of space taken away, the community space taken away, where students would meet, but they no longer have the opportunity to gather and speak. And you can see a lot of disconnection starting to happen in our schools. So, and that's a good example. That's why I'm worried about the community space. In Concord we have to develop more community space where people can meet and share ideas, share cultural differences, and continue to grow together. And that's what I'm worried about. So those are two things that I want to hear more information that you have or you're planning. You have us about that.
I appreciate those comments. One, I guess, to address the aspect of sustainability as we think about our building systems and the building itself. Certainly, again, we can consider, how much could we achieve to try to get on-site solar. Another important consideration is that a lot of times it's more efficient, not necessarily to have the solar concentrated in small amounts on site, but actually regionalized solar farms, solar panels also can be one way of achieving using solar electricity to achieve sustainability. So that's one consideration there. The other thing, just we're improving the energy systems by reducing the amount of energy we need, having highly insulated envelopes, and in fact, we're, as Kelly mentioned, we're replacing the thermal envelope of the existing building, so that's going to be upgraded, and all new high efficiency systems in both of those. And they say that the most sustainable thing you can do is to reuse existing infrastructure instead of the whole large carbon footprint and draw of resources to create something new. So it's the idea of being able to leverage an existing facility is also a very sustainable practice as well. Regarding your second question, which was how can we make sure that the public spaces are preserved for public use? Again, one of the ways that we're being thoughtful about the programming of this is by having, as Kelly and Rob have mentioned, having a little bit more room to be able to accommodate the changes that will come over time. So we're not programmed with bursting at the seams at day one. We have room to grow in a thoughtful way so that we're not having to necessarily take over all those spaces that are intended to really bring the public in. It's been a hallmark of this project to make sure that the station itself, the facility, feels very much like a public facility, and they're welcome. And that's part of the reason that the building is designed the way it is. Anything else?
Could I just ask the last?
Yeah.
I'll just ask the last question. So my understanding is when you were starting to put this together, you were looking at creating a community space that would have a separate entrance to it, so that folks could use it during all kinds of hours, and it would be also secure from the police department for security purposes, versus the amount of community space we have in the existing police department, which is zero and always has been zero. So is that still part of this plan?
That's very much.
We can show it. Yeah, so it's in the existing building, so it's right here. This is the public entrance right here. The lobby's open 24 hours a day. It's a 24-hour, 7 days a week operation. So they have a separate entrance, and they can come right in here, and that's separated from all the secure facilities within the building itself. So it can accommodate different hours. And then there's this space out front we've talked about of being able to use outdoor space. Doors open out into that, so you can kind of spill out into the lawn as well if we wanted to have outdoor community events as well. But yes, it's maintained in the fully public portion of the building and not behind any of the secure areas of the building. Thank you. No quick question.
Just a quick one. As we're looking forward at like alternate transportation and having community space, please make sure there's like a bike rack or any of those rooms.
Yes, we do have bike racks in there. We have conduits for EV chargers so that we can expand that out. We have talked about solar canopies. One of the response times is in the winter when the cars are covered in snow. They've asked for a canopy. Right now, it could be an add-all if that's something that council wants us to look at, but you can put solar on top of that where we have a little bit more room in solar aspect to take advantage of that as well.
Quick question. Is the emergency generator being relocated?
I know it's moved since. Kelly, do you want to show where it is?
Yes, it is. I'm just gonna sneak over here. So it will be relocated to the back of the building for acoustical and ballistic protections. It will be enclosed in its own separate enclosure, separate of the screening fence beyond that. So yes, it'll be relocated to the back of the building.
So you said acoustic, because that impacts all
Yes.
the properties.
Yep. 8-foot tall CMU solid block wall.
So, yes, because there's a building across the street from us, Guinea. We can hear their generator.
I think that's out in the open, isn't it?
It's very loud.
Yeah, where you put it.
There's an enclosure, but it's not very
Yeah.
No, can the existing generator,
Oh, yes, so, it already is getting a shield and then it's getting an additional.
It's getting, a lot of generators don't come with mufflers, or acoustical attenuation.
A lot of generators don't come with acoustical attenuation just right out of the gate because they're not cycled all the time. Public safety is going to cycle frequently in order to make sure that it's tested and operational. So we can perhaps verify, if not look into getting the generator with that. In addition to being behind the CMU wall, that masonry wall will be a high mass wall and does a pretty good job of controlling some of that noise reverberation.
Yeah, so I think we've got to wrap it up. Sorry. Tuesday night we'll be presenting more about this, and again in the future it still has to go to planning board. So there are still sorts of design implications as it goes through. We just need appropriation so that we can move forward to those steps. So thank you all for. Yes, the presentation and the recording will be online by the end of this week, hopefully. Thank you all for coming out.